Hey everybody, welcome back to the Audiomo podcast number 7. I am back with Dave Nelson. How are you doing tonight, David?
Doing pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm pretty good. We're just tired. We both have daughters, and it's a very, very, very long weekend. I know you had family over, so you know how it goes. But what I would like to lead this conversation off today is we talk about value a lot, and we talk about, obviously, the last two guitars that I've demoed have been Harley Bentons that have been new, that have been under $400 each before shipping, obviously, for each one. And it got me to thinking for recommendations for people for kind of on a lower budget. And sadly, normally we would say like $500 used to be like a really sweet spot for finding really good gear. But as prices have gone up and, with the guitar boom and everything, trying to find that kind of quality, you can do it, but you have a little more options if you expand kind of your price range. So basically, I want to start at $1,000. What are the best guitars that you can get new and used, in your opinion, for $1,000?
So I think if you're talking used, I think both you and me obviously are first going to jump for any kind of PRS, right? I think if you find the right SE models, and by that I mean generally the SE Customs, or just an SE that you tend to, maybe just agrees with you, right? Like you play an SE that feels good, great. Know that you'll probably have to replace the pickups in it, but, that's only if you're picky like us. I think, for me personally, the other guitars that I've had that have been kind of quote unquote budget, sort of in those sorts of ranges that I've really liked a lot have always been Ibanez's. I have a Talman that I bought used for like $200 that I absolutely love. And obviously now they got the artist series, the essentials there, which I think are coming in like $300, somewhere around there. And that's a lot of bang for buck. Yeah, right. And they look great. They got the roasted maple neck and everything, and super, super cool mod platform, right? So I think you're good there. I think if we're sticking really below 1,000, LTD's got some great stuff. I think I probably wouldn't lean towards any of the stuff that's really sub 500 from them, but when you start to get between the 8 and 1,000 mark, their stuff is just fantastic, right there.
I agree with you on the LTDs, especially. And, well, everybody knows how I feel about the PRS line. So, just to reiterate your point, I believe that, yes, those are as good as you're going to get. I think the best new guitars, the two best new guitars under $1,000 that you can get, period, are both from PRS, and that is the Zach Myers. This is semi-hollow body, kind of Les Paul shaped guitar, or the Custom 24. I think that those are the two best guitars that you can get new for that price point, that are going to have pretty much everything you need right out of the gate. But going back to the ESPs here, what I love about those 1000s, which we both have a lot of experience with, you still can get them used between, if you're really lucky, 500, or if you want to spend a little bit more, get one of the ones that are full size, like a Les Paul Custom, like $800. Those are almost impossible to beat. And when you're looking at guitars that are, mass produced for American market, I say that because there's a lot of good Japanese brands that I'd like to mention, but there's simply not enough supply. And in order to get a lot of them here, you'd have to go through the import process. And let's be honest, most people don't want to do that. So I would say those two guitars are great. You could still get Fender American Standards and Fender American Specials used for under $1,000. I think if you're going to buy a Fender guitar and you have $1,000, you're crazy to buy a Mexican one at this point, unless you're getting a really good deal used on it, when you can buy an American, either professional I've seen for $999, a standard for $900 or $800, depending on the color configuration and the pickup configuration as well, or a special sometimes when those come up at Dave's, $799. You're just not going to beat that. But when it comes to the single cut guitars, that's a tough sell, man. I mean, yeah, we both aren't the biggest fan of what Gibson offers at $1,000. Yeah, I think the reason that I'm so hard on both Epiphone and on Fender Mexico has a lot to do with the fact that I look at the prices of those now. Like, they just released the BB King, the Lucille for the Epiphone, is $950. All right. What can you get that's that body style for that amount of money on a regular basis? You can get an Eastman that comes with vastly superior electronics already in it, better build quality because there's less of them being made. They could take more attention to them, and I think you're even getting a hard shell case in at that price. And you factor that in versus the mass-produced Epiphones, which we know have some quality control issues as is. I don't see the value at that point when it comes to those. And then when you're talking about the Les Pauls, I would rather take one of the ESP ones over those. I would even rather have the Harley Benton over any of the Epiphones, just period. That's just me. But it's interesting too, because one kind of guitar that we don't talk about very often, as far as just me and you, we don't really talk about semi-hollows that much. And one brand that really flies under the radar, well, two brands actually. One is Guild, which we addressed on the other podcast, so I'm not going to totally rehash them. But Gretsch. Now, the Korean Gretsches, they're still out there. There's still some models that you can get new that are made in Korea for, I think, $899, if I'm remembering correctly. Decent pickups, come with the actual Bigsby on it, not like a kind of house brand Bigsby. It's really, really cool vibe guitars. You can get it either full hollow body or you can get it with a semi-hollow body. You have any experience with those guitars?
I played a couple of them in high school. I think there was some, guys that we had who played in the jazz band who had them. And I think, honestly, that's kind of why I don't really think about them, right? They're sort of like outside of my kind of world of guitars. They don't really look like guitars I would play. They don't really look like guitars that people I like play, and it's nothing against them or whatever. And the only person I can think of that plays, hollow bodies in the context of rock is, at least, out and about, rather than just on record is, Dave Grohl, right? And like he classically plays a few hollow bodies and they're fine and they work. And honestly, I have a PRS SE that is a hollow body that I use in the studio all the time. I love it, right? But it's very much a PRS that also happens to be a hollow body, right? Like there's something about those, giant kind of thick jazz bodied looking hollow bodies that it either screams like rockabilly or, late night jazz club. And it's just not a vibe I really fall into. So I'm looking at their site now just to kind of like see if they're offering anything that doesn't really fall in that vibe. And they've got some stuff here that's interesting, but it all really kind of hits that sort of Stray Cats thing that it doesn't bother me. It's just not my personal preference,
I understand. I think, a brand that is not in this price range doesn't really kind of fall into this category, but I feel the similar way too, is Novo and Revolta. The Revoltas are the ones that are made in Korea, and the Novos obviously the really high-end ones that are made in America. I just think they're ugly. Like they just don't do it for me. Like I've never played one, so I can't sit here and be like they don't live up to the hype. I've never liked one enough visually, and I can't get past that. It's kind of like when we were talking about those shredder guitars in a previous podcast where they have the really, really pointy headstocks. I can't do that either. It's kind of the same thing with like those.
Yeah. I knew Novo, sorry, but I didn't know Revolta. And looking at their site, there's one of these that I don't mind, and it's the Regatta 7 here. It's
Is that the semi-hollow?
It is, yeah. And it has like a normal, just there's a wood finish and then there's a red finish, and it just sort of looks like a regular guitar as opposed to these other ones that sort of look like 1950s diners, Jesus Which is fine. It's a cool look, I even talked about this on the live podcast where we were like, talking about how I sort of enjoy that sort of retro future kind of vibe, and that's what I really love about those millimetric guitars. This in particular is just that kind of like bright in your face sort of version of it. That's not my favorite, but I do like the Regatta 7. That's pretty cool.
I'm just laughing just incessantly at that. That's never going to get old to me. Another thing that I think is really funny about those kinds of other brands, we've talked about built guitars, and just we're not really fans of those either. Is there a brand that you've wanted to like, but you can't get past the looks outside of the ones that we've talked about? Because there's one that comes to mind to me, and that's Heritage, because I know that those are made in the Kalamazoo. I know that they're super high quality, but the headstock on Heritage guitars, I just cannot get past it. Everything else about them is fantastic. I can't do it. What do you think about those?
I'm trying. We talk about so many brands. I have to pull stuff up every time we talk about shit. Let me see. I can't find the heads. Oh, it's got like the kind of like quasi melody maker thing going on. Yeah. But with like big cutaways. Ooh, yeah. I feel that. I can't really think of any off the top of my head that I like genuinely dislike. I mean, like we talked about, like Gretsch, it's just not my vibe. It's not that I dislike it. It's just not something I can like would see myself really playing. There's a few of them. There's a few of those custom guys that I always go like, they'll pop up on Instagram and you'll see the guitar and you'll be like, wow, that looks amazing. And then you swipe to the next picture and it's this like, fucking shoebox of a headstock. And you're like, why? Why did you do that? How is this not like giving a neck dive, And that I see that feels like that sort of happens a lot. Let's see. Let me see. Take a look out here and see if I can.
Yeah. So I just sent you a link to a guitar company that I also see on Instagram a lot that gets pushed to me, and it's called Pure Salem Guitars. I want to know what you think about those. I think that they have a few models that look pretty freaking cool in my honest opinion, but I've never seen anybody really play one. Obviously, I've seen a few people do the demos on YouTube, but I've never like seen an active person using them and give their honest take on it, without it being kind of sponsored content. What do you think about those?
I think that the Brave Ulysses is the ugliest thing I've ever seen in my life. There are a few here that are cool, but man, that is not one of them. It sort of looks like somebody maybe had a piece of cheese fall off of their burger and they were like, that'd be a cool guitar body shape. It's awful. No, they got a couple other cool ones here. They have that same like kind of, what's that headstock style? It's got the curve with the set, the two-step thing.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan. Not a big
It's
fan
like a
of that.
Starcaster.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? As a guy who grew up listening to a lot of metal, I have always hated BC Riches. They're like the pinnacle of this. That is just like I like that there are guys that really love those guitars, and there are dudes that are like hardcore about that brand. But man, they're fucking ugly. I just can't. I don't know. I remember there was a guy in high school who was like, he had just got a brand new Mockingbird, and he was like, "Isn't this like the coolest thing ever?" And you have to just be like, "Yeah, man, so cool." I'm like, you could like kill somebody with the edge of that thing, Oh.
Yeah, that's why I never got into metal, I think, when I was like really young, because all those players like the Kirk Hammetts and those, they all played the ESPs with the really pointy, or the Jacksons or the Ibanez, whatever, but like the really pointy headstocks on them, and I was always just like, they look like weapons. I'm not a fan. I can't do it, but I think that I think we're in a really good time, but I think that people that are kind of smaller shops, like the one I just linked to you, like Pure Salem Guitars, it's such a competitive market that I don't even know half of them exist. There's probably a company that's like the perfect mix for both of us combined, really. Yeah, absolutely, and we just don't know they're out there. So I think we're spoiled for choice. And what I would like to do is I'd like to, ask anybody who's listening to this podcast if you can leave a recommendation to one of those really small brands, like something that not a lot of people have heard of, because it's something that we would like to investigate a little bit more, and it's something that I would potentially like to demo on the channel, because I don't want to just keep doing the same things over and over again. Sure, however, speaking about things that were demoed on the channel and moving to a different topic, this week, I don't know if you watched this, I demoed one of those $20 hardband, the pedals, the fuzz.
The silly fuzz, right? Yeah.
Did you listen?
I didn't get a chance to. I saw it today when I was cruising through the YouTubes. How was it?
It was a $20 pedal. Basically, so the way that I think it was usable to me, and I said this in the demo too, it sounded exactly like something that would come out of a Super Nintendo game or a regular 8-bit Nintendo game, like fidelity-wise. Like it has these really weird artifacts to it and this really strange kind of fuzz tone to it. Like, it's really unique, and if you were looking for like that exact kind of sound, I mean, sure, it could work for that, but like as an overall kind of fuzz tone, I was like, yeah, I'm not really feeling this, and I think I made it pretty clear without bashing it that I was not the biggest fan of it. But I mean, at $20, it was what it was. So I only mentioned that. Sorry, I only mentioned it because I wanted to ask your opinion about fuzz pedals. Do you have a favorite?
let's see. I don't think I have a favorite, and mostly because I think, like we're talking about with guitars here, the pedal world is so expansive that there's probably a pedal out there that, would be my favorite if I played it, but I'm not going to play all 8,000 fuzz pedals that exist to try them out. So as far as things that I have experience with, I think the classics are good. But to be honest with you, I'm not a fan of fuzz pedals that sort of sound like distortion, because I feel like in my world, distortion does what distortion does. And I don't like when fuzz kind of tries to live in that world, I just don't think it does it as good as a good distortion does. So when I want fuzz, I want the fuzz effect, right? Like I want like an octave fuzz, or like a really, really like heavy Velcro fuzz where it's just like gating the crap out of stuff and you're getting all sorts of weird, noise and artifacts and stuff in there. And something that really just says like, this is a weird big sound. Or the only other time I really like fuzz is when you're doing a huge distortion part and you need something that's just going to throw like that extra top in, to like give you that last 10% of heavy that you can't get with the distortion, but you can get because the fuzz is just like blaring noise through it, So I tend to gravitate towards that. I have, I'm trying to think for fuzz. I have this like weird Russian fuzz that I got a really long time ago. I don't even know what it's called. I think it's called the Heretic Fuzz. Yeah. It like doesn't have any branding or anything on it. I haven't seen one ever since, and I love it. It's got a ton of options on it. It can get super Velcro-y when you want to. It's from some random company. I don't even remember why I found it or where I heard it, but it's great. I use it when I need that tone. And then the other one I have is it's a Big Green, which is it's from Arc Effects. It's just the classic. If I want like the 90s vibe kind of thing going, I can pull that out.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm really particular with fuzz. Like when I love it, I really love it. But I'm like you. I want it to either have the Velcro effect to it, or be like super velvety and just like a fur coat, like you're wearing over yourself, like that kind of tone. And I've been through a lot of fuzz pedals, and the only one that I look back on and I'm like, I gotta be rebuy that one day is the Full Tone, the 70. I had the 60, which is the one that's based on the germanium. That's the pink kind of encapsulation to it. I liked it. I bought that one first because I liked, this is going to sound so stupid, but I liked the kind of pink pedal more than I liked the blue pedal. And I was like, oh, if I'm going to try one, that'll work better for me, whatever. I figure I can get in the ballpark. No, Germanium Fuzz is not a tone that I personally really like. And especially when you're chording, if you're going to use a fuzz for something like that, I mean, you really need to have the use of the effect on it. Otherwise, like you said, why wouldn't I just use a distortion pedal? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Especially, like I get it back in, the 60s and 50s and stuff when it's like your options for distortion are pretty limited. So it's either fuzz or nothing, right? But now it's like I got so many great things I can get so much great distortion from that I'm never going to go to a fuzz pedal first.
No, man, now I really miss that pedal because there's like, and it sucks because it's such a situational thing, because maybe on an entire record, I'll use fuzz for a lead line or a solo, 3 times. That's it, total. But for those 3 times, it's like the distortion won't do what I want. It just won't do what I want. Right. And then it's like, do I need this pedal then? It's like, well, when you're recording, you need it, but do you need it all the time? No, and it's,
No. But it's tough. Sometimes it's about just hunting for things for less. It's like, I don't need any more pedals, or I don't need any more amps. But it's like, I either get the thing or I spend however long trying to figure it out with something else. And at this point in my life, time is valuable. So if it's a pedal, it's a pedal. So go buy it. Go buy a new fuzz pedal. You deserve it, Jim.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess the only fortunate thing about that is the Full Tone fuzz pedal that I do love is on the low end when it comes to fuzz pedal pricing. I can get one for like $100. I've seen some of these fuzz pedals. You know how the boutique market works. It's outrageous, the pricing of some of these. And even the distortion pedals now. What's that? It's like $550, the Origin Effects. The really expensive distortion pedal. It's like, I'd love to try one of those too. I mean, it's nothing to do with fuzz, but it's a pedal that I hear everybody rave about, but I'm not spending $550 on a distortion pedal. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, it's a bit much. I mean, at $550, you can buy an amp that probably does, just as good. I have seen things on it, and it does sound really good, but it's at that price, it needs to do more, I think.
Okay, so that kind of leads me into another thing that I'd like to talk about then. We're talking about guitar tones. We're talking about, can the amp really just do it instead of the fuzz pedal or the distortion pedal, which will lead me to this. The last podcast I had, I did talk to the co-owner of Capricorn Studios, Chris Town. I actually asked him what he thought about the Kemper, the Quad Cortex, and the Helix and stuff like that versus miking up a real cab. And his thought was, it's really situational and it's going to depend on the band and the song and stuff like that, but you're never really going to beat the authentic just miking things up correctly. And I mean, you have to understand it. I do understand this, just to reiterate here. This is coming from a guy who has access to a perfect room, who has access to multiple speaker cabinets and a mic locker that would make almost anybody very, very envious. However, I still think that there is some merit to it. And what I'd like to ask you then is, if given the choice, would you rather do it in the box the way you're doing it right now and have that kind of like ease of doing it, knowing how easy it is to get that tone, and maybe sacrifice like that, 5%, 10%, or go through the hassle of like really dialing it in, getting the right mics, getting the right placement, and doing it the old school way?
So I think that there's probably multiple versions of an answer here. I'm going to try to do one that doesn't feel like a cop-out. I think if you're playing with a player who feels like, because I think it's easy to have a shitty answer to this, right? And I know you're going to give me shit about it if I do have a shitty answer. So I think if you have a player who feels like his instrument and his setup is what works for him, it's worth putting in the time to do those things. I think when it comes to listening to records that have impulse responses on them versus listening to records that have live amps, I don't think it matters, right? Like, I think I've listened to plenty of records that have had impulse responses and didn't know, and I've listened to plenty of records that had live amps and didn't know, So, like, at the end of the day, when the thing is printed down, I don't think that it makes a difference. And for me, it's faster to do an impulse response, and it still sounds great. And for my setup, I just bought the GGD oversized Cali cabs, right? I don't have an oversized Mesa cab here that I can sit and mic up for hours. If a guy showed up and he had one and he was like, man, my rig sounds amazing, and I know he's going to play better through his rig than he's going to play better through my setup, then I'm going to do it, But I think at the end of the day, it is situational. And if it's helping the player or helping the song, then mic it up. If it's helping me and it's helping my time, I'm going to go for the impulse response.
I'm not going to give you shit for that answer. I think that's a decent answer. I will say this. I think when it comes to overdriven and getting into the land of gain, I really don't notice it that much anymore. You used to be able to really notice the digitalness of it, but nowadays I don't really, I don't notice it as much. But when it comes to like that pure kind of clean tone, the stuff that, I focus a lot more on that stuff. I still hear it. And even with the best kind of things, like it'll sound good, but it's not as good, especially when you're incorporating a spring reverb from the amp itself. There's something about that when you're tracking it. You get these strange little artifacts and these strange little noises that just don't come through that you can hear on old records, and you're just not going to get it because it's almost too perfect at that point. But with that being said, once you start introducing effects into this mix, and I'm talking like really ambient reverbs or delays and phasers and stuff like that, I think I'm at the point now where I'd rather do it in the box. It seems like it's like less of a hassle. Maybe record the clean track and then have the Quad Cortex, or in my case, the Quad Cortex, reamp it through the effects loop of the Quad Cortex with all that stuff turned on after the fact.
I personally have a really hard time dialing in effects through an amp that I know are going to sit correctly in the mix later. So I'd rather have the clean signal to then mess with and set properly afterwards, because it's like, obviously I'm sure you've run into this where you're doing a mix and then like, or you're working with a track where you've got a ton of reverb on a guitar and you think like, oh man, this is so much reverb, and then you pull it up in the mix and you're like, I can't even hear the reverb, like, and it's printed that way. There's nothing you can do. And to your point too, I think the other place where the IRs fall short, and this is more towards kind of the style of music that you're doing versus what I'm doing too, is when you want room sound. I feel like nothing is better than an actual room sound for guitar. I've started to lean the opposite way on drums actually lately, but only because I've been forced to use fake rooms for a long time. But in a guitar situation, a real room I think is always worth it if you can get it. And obviously for the stuff that I do, it's never I never really need room. Like I can throw it in there as some glue afterwards, but I want the guitars right up in your face, right next to your ear. So for that, there's nothing better than an IR, because that's literally what it is, right?
Exactly. And one piece of advice I'd like to give to anybody who might not have the experience that Dave, myself, or Chris Talon has, obviously, we're nowhere near the experience that he has. But when you're recording your guitars, it doesn't matter what you're using. The first thing that you should buy is some way to have two signals, so an A/B box. You want to always record the DI along with, if you're going to be putting it through a plugin or you're going to be miking an amp, you want to at least be able to go back, because you could have a killer performance, and I've had this happen to me and it sucks. In the exact scenario that Dave just mentioned, I had the reverb dialed in. I thought it was almost a little too much at the time when I was tracking it, but I nailed the part. When it came down to post and we were mixing it, there was no way to bring it back up. And we tried everything. There was just no way around it. It was just, I was never going to capture it. But at the same time, I had the DI track. So we managed to reamp it after the fact. It was one of those things, just like, oh, well, he kind of was screwing with me. He's like, oh, well, we could just reamp it. And I was like, what? I'm like, you actually took the DI too? He's just like, yeah. He's like, I'm not an idiot. I'm like, thank God. So, but it really can be the difference. And one of those things, it can be very demoralizing, where if you have a take that good and you really feel that strong about it, and maybe, this is why I didn't really like phasers and flangers and stuff like that for recording, because if you get it wrong, it's so wrong. And it's
undoable, and there's nothing
you're dead. You're stuck with what you're stuck with. It's like you either scrap the part entirely, or you're going to start from scratch again. And that sucks. And nobody wants to do that, because, time is money and time is valuable. And when you're recording, especially if you're in a studio, you don't want to deal with that. So it's just a matter of a balancing act and just trying to figure out whatever works for you. But if you take nothing away from this, that piece of advice is invaluable. Always, always, always have a DI along with whatever process signal you're using. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like that was a nice little tangent on that one right there. So
yeah, with some free advice at the end. Look at that.
Yeah, free advice. Everything's free in life, right? I mean, all depends. But I want to recap the albums, because I had a lot to say about this one. So last week, we recommended albums to each other. I recommended you Funeral for a Friend, Hours. I'm going to start with you. What did you think about the album?
Okay, I'm gonna start somewhere that seems like it's not related. I'm gonna pull it back. Do you know the band Tesla? Yeah. So back in the day, when I first started playing guitar, right, as a lot of people do when they first start playing guitar, is really into classic rock, right? It's kind of like a lot of people's sort of gateway into that kind of thing, right? So you start with classic rock, you start to move to kind of 70s, 80s or whatever. I got really into Motley Crue, right? Because one, they played in Drop D, which was super cool. And I didn't have any of the 80s association with them that most people did, right? So to me, it was just like, hey, these songs are cool, right? Anyway, so went to go see Motley Crue live. And they're one of the worst live bands ever. If anybody is ever, I don't even think they tour anymore, but if they do for any reason, do not ever spend money to go see Motley Crue. Vince Neil may be one of the worst live performers I've ever seen in my life. Anyway, point was, Tesla opened for them. And I don't really know Tesla that well, right? Like, aside from, they got the one hit, I can't even remember what the name of it is. But anyway, so we're watching them play, and I'm like, cool, these guys are cool, like, but this doesn't really, like, I don't know, it feels weird. And I couldn't put my finger on it. And then I start to realize, like, oh, these guys are not a hair metal band. Like, they're not an 80s band. Like, they're trying to be. But the dude's singing in a falsetto the whole time because he's trying to do the hair metal thing, right? The guy's back there on giant drums, and he's like, trying to push through it or whatever because they're trying to be a hair metal band. The other guy's got way too much distortion on his guitar because it's supposed to be heavy. And then the lead guy starts ripping this blues solo, and I'm like, oh my God, they're not even close. They're just pretending, right? And at one point they actually they played some other random song of theirs or whatever that was literally just straight up a blues jam. And I'm not like into blues or anything, but I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. Like they're doing this well. But like it always gets me thinking about this idea that like there's a genre that's popular, right? And suddenly you have these guys who are just like, hey man, this isn't working right now, but like hair metal's in right now. So what can we do to just be hair metal, right? And obviously this dude's like, well, I'm just singing a falsetto the whole time, like all these other guys are doing. And you turn the distortion up on your thing, and the guy in the back are like, let's add a double bass pedal or something, and then like suddenly they're a hair metal band, even though they don't want to be. But then realistically, now that you look back and you go like, oh my God, like everybody was doing the hair metal thing, they would have way more longevity if they had just stuck with the blues thing and figured out a way to make it work, right? Because we all know blues bands that still do that. And so I'm listening to Funeral for a Friend, and it's the first thing that comes to my mind is I'm like, there is a metal band underneath this emo thing that I wish that they were. Like, don't get me wrong, I love emo. I'm a huge emo head. My wife has a shirt that says Elder Emo, and she wears it all the time with pride. And we both love emo. Like, and I'm not knocking it, but there were a lot of moments on this record where I was just like, oh man, this did not age well. And if they had taken away these things, it still would have been great, but it wouldn't have been so dated. You know what I mean? Like we had like one of those breakdowns where there was like talking over it, and they had like the really like drawn out little delay guitar thing. And it was just like, I know you, and you're just like, oh man, just stuff that just screams like 2002. That being said, that was a very long way of saying that I think the players are really good, and I think there was a lot of cool stuff going on there. I wish someone had been like, this album will be way more timeless if you just don't do a lot of this like cliche emo stuff. But it was really cool. I mean, it literally like right off the bat, you're like, you drum fill in and you like, ripping open D riff or whatever. And I'm like, I know exactly what this is going to be. Right. And even with the name and the album cover and everything, you're just like, I know what I'm in for, and it's cool. It's super good. It's actually funny. I like kind of didn't get into the emo thing until, I don't know, fairly recently, couple years ago. I started like really going back into all that stuff. And my wife laughs at me about it because that was all she listened to in high school. And, I'm like, have you heard of this band called like Brand New? And she's like, yeah, I've heard of fucking Brand New. And I'm like, they're amazing. But it was cool shit, man. I really liked it. There was definitely some great songs, and it was cool stuff. Just immediately I was just like, oh yeah, like these guys are going to go on the emo rotation with all the other shit that I'm like suddenly discovering for the first time. So that was a roundabout way of getting to the point of that I thought it was a cool record. I really, really do love the emo stuff, and it's definitely going on. It's going on my emo playlist. Cool.
Okay. I brought up that record. This is so funny. We really are in the same train of thought on so many levels. I did not expect that answer. I love half of that album. The half of that album I love, I think, is amazing. The other half of that album, and it's not like in chronological order, but like, like half the songs I'm like, these songs don't work. These are so clearly forced. You guys are clearly going through, like somebody's in your ear saying, write a song that sounds like that. Exactly. Yep. And
there's that one track where they start screaming. Like it's like 5 tracks with no screaming. And then there's one track with screaming, and it's just that typical, like, I do a clean verse. And you're like, why? Who needed this?
Nobody.
Nobody did. One. Yeah.
But it's one of those records that I pointed out because it for whatever reason, it frustrates the living hell out of me, because it could have been like an all around, like, I mean, obviously they're good. They're really good. And another thing that's really funny that you mentioned Motley Crue being terrible live. Funeral for a Friend might be worse. Oh, dude, it was brutal. I saw them, like, really cool guys. I hung out with them after they played at the Warped Tour, but they had one of the worst party nights in history the night before, or they were memorably bad. And when you're that bad and it stands out in your memory, like that's not a good sign, because everybody has off days. I've had gigs where, I've been like, oh shit, I bombed that one, but oh, it was a gigantor bomb, and it was not one person. It was pretty much the whole thing. But I love that album. And another funny thing is, after and before that album, they have records that are like straight up like way more metalish, like a lot of like older kind of, like you mentioned, 80s hair metal kind of stuff into it. So that's why I'm like, is he like, does he know more than he's
no,
right
I
now?
didn't. Yeah, no. I will say I was super impressed with their I feel like in this space there was a lot of bad two guitar player bands, that are just like either playing the same thing or just doing the same types of things, where it's just like every single thing is just like big chords and then octave line on top of it or whatever, or breakdown with two notes, dissonant notes on top of it or whatever. They did a lot of really cool, interesting things with the two guitars that I wasn't expecting. Like a riff would happen and then I'd be like, that's a really weird riff. And then I'd have to pick apart what each one was doing because they found a way to kind of weave into each other in a really cool way. I thought very stand out for this particular genre. So it was definitely impressed by that. So it's a bummer to hear that they're not great live, but it happens to the best of us.
Maybe like I said, maybe I just saw them on their worst gig of all time, but it's
possible. Yeah.
It was not good. And leading to the album that you gave me, totally kind of different vibe here, was, of course, who, David?
Microwave. The incredible Microwave.
Much love. Now, this album, this was a weird one, man. And if you're watching this, you're probably thinking that I'm about to trash this album. It couldn't be further from that. I say it's weird because there's not many times that I can listen to an album or really a band for the first time and like have it feel like I've listened to it and I know these songs. You know what I mean? And it's like that's one of my favorite, if not my favorite genre of music, is like that kind of thing where it's just so straightforward, but it's clever at the same time. The song that stood out to me the most was Lighterless. Lighterless was a song that was so good that I had to write it down because I'm like, you are saving that and you're going to buy the record that just basically for that song. And I think it was like the second or third one I heard into it. So I was just like, yeah, this is fantastic. I thought that songs like Dull, obviously, I didn't ever hear that song on the radio, but it sounded like the song that they were putting out as the single, so to speak. I liked what they did with the melodies on that. I liked how at the end of the choruses, when he was singing the vocal melody, the guitar did not just like a generic little thing with it, but kind of like a sweet little arpeggio, kind of to just mirror exactly what he was doing. And just the phrasing is really good. This album was great. This was a very, very, very solid album from top to finish. I was disappointed that it was only 10 songs by the time it was over. It felt like it was just at the beginning. And that's the sign of a good record. When it finishes and you're like, wait, that's it? And it's a full-length release, you're like, that sucks, but it's awesome at the same time. So I'm really happy that that one commenter even left that comment to begin with, because if he had never left that comment, then Dave would have never brought this band up to me. And it pisses me off. I said this to Dave off air. I said, how have you never told me about this band? And he's like, oh yeah, I've seen this band a bunch of times. I have a 420 Microwave t-shirt. But you never told me. And he's like, oh, I didn't know if you'd like them.
Well, you know what's going to be even worse? Travis, the bass player for this band, mixed our last record. So I have even more connection to him than that. And yeah, I'd never mentioned them. They're just one of those bands where I think, like, if you're not into that thing, like, you're really not going to like it, you know? And I don't know. Honestly, I don't even really know why I say that, because that thing that they're doing is just like kind of messy rock, you know? Like, realistically, if you like rock of any kind, you'll love Microwave. They are just rock, you know? But honestly, I think my favorite part about Microwave, and I struggle to even think of many other people that do this, is there's something about the way he writes lyrics that feel like he's talking to you, and it all just happens to rhyme, or it happens to fall into the right places. Like, it's so, I don't know. I can't even think of the right words. There's like, he just says a line and you're just like, yeah, that's like how people talk. People just say, and then he'll say the next line and you're like, yeah. That was exactly what was supposed to come after what he said before. And for some reason it rhymed at the end of the phrase. And I know exactly what you're talking about because I felt that same thing a million times. And it's so simple and stupid, and it cut right to your bones. You know what I mean?
That's why I mentioned it. I said it was just so straightforward and so like easily digestible, so to speak, I guess is a good way to put it. But that's how it came across. I didn't even think of him as a singer. I thought of it as just like a conversation almost. Like I was just like listening to somebody kind of tell me what they're going up with. And and he's going through that one song. I think it was Dull. Yeah, it was Dull, where he's talking about how much he loved falling in love and all this, and it's just like it's all just gone to shit. It sounded like a friend on the phone more than it sounded like just some guy I'd never heard of before singing some songs to me. It was like, it was really, really, really good. And it messes with me still just how good it was. And I think because of that detail that we both just kind of hit on, that's kind of why it like triggered like a lot of like memories for me. And when I was playing in Southern California a lot, there was a lot of bands that tried to like get this kind of sound to it. You know what I mean? Not everyone is successful for it. And it is simple, but simple's hard. Simple's very hard. That's why, especially genres like this, genres like blues, forget it. Those are not genres that are easy to blow up in because you have to have something like really different about it and really rememberable about it in order for people to catch on, because the genre is implicitly just relatively easy.
Right. Agreed. Yeah. Yeah. And I do think that they're doing some cool stuff in that space. If you liked this album, I think you'll really like the one before it, Stovall, as well. I'd give that a listen. I'd actually be really curious to get your thoughts on the next one, which is, I think it's Death is a Warm Blanket. It is a wild left turn from this album. And there are things about it that I enjoy, but there are a lot of things about it that are not quite my favorite. So I'd be curious to see what you think about the next one, because it's very, very different.
Okay, yeah, I'm. This band is absolutely on my radar now, and they're gonna be somebody that I'm buying the records for because, yeah, I don't know. It's one thing I like about this segment is because I'm old, and you know how it is when you get old. You're kind of like less willing, like when a random person says, "Oh, check this band out," you're like, "Yeah, okay, whatever." And because every once in a while you'll get lucky, but some of the times not always kind of the right stuff for what I like. But this is just introducing me to stuff that I wouldn't have known before, and I really do like. So I appreciate that, and I think that this is really cool. And if anybody else could take that away from this, then all the better as well. So my recommendation for you for this week is going to be a trio of a husband, a wife, and then a rotating drummer, basically. It was a full drummer on this one album, but the name of the band is Ume, and the album UME. Monuments. That's it. I think you'll like it. I think you'll like it. I really like it. So what do you have for me? Ooh. Okay. Yeah. That's when I listened to Hazaki, who's a Japanese guitarist. I know I'm listening to whatever song that is released like 4 or 5 times before I've actually heard everything in the song, and I love music like that. So yeah, that's a pretty cool that's a good way to kind of tee me up for it. So that's a good lead into it. Yeah, I mean, we got a few people signed up for it. We have people in the Discord now, which is pretty cool. I actually got into a long conversation with a few people today about a varying wide variety of things. Oh, Marcus just joined the Discord. He's from New York. How's it going? Yeah, I was just checking to see what's going on. It's nice, man. It's nice having this sense of community to it. And as far as the actual Patreon and giving away the guitars, it's going to take a while. And I tried to make that like known in the video. I was just like, look, I do not expect this to happen overnight. I know that I'm not going to be one of these people that's going to get like 100 or 200 or even 20 people like immediately to sign up for it, because at the end of the day, I'm very small fish in the sea. But I think over time that this is going to be a really sustainable model. And I think that it's better to do it like this than to just, kind of you donate to somebody so they can demo the gear and then they either send the gear back or they sell it or they keep it. Like, how does that really benefit the Patreon at that point?
Yeah, no, I totally get it. And honestly, in my never-ending list of hobbies, I'm a huge coffee nerd. And there's a guy on YouTube, he's pretty big on YouTube now at this point, James Hoffman. And he does the same thing, right? So he does these Patreon things. They'll do like, coffee grinder roundup where he'll buy like 10 coffee grinders that all cost $1,000 or whatever, and then he just gives them away at the end of them, and I really think it's the only way to make it feel like the Patreon just isn't some empty void for your money to just flow into. So I think it's the right move. I think it's the best way to go. And whatever, if it takes forever, it takes forever. This is it. This is how you build the thing, right? You can't build the thing without building the thing.
No, and if that was my goal here, was like to immediately make money and do all this, like I said, I would have a completely different approach to the entire channel in general. So I'm really happy, and I'm still surprised at the growth as is, to be honest. So I mean, if it takes as long as it takes, that is what it is. But at the end of the day, somebody is at least going to get one free guitar. So we'll see how it goes, and I'm excited for it, and especially I really want to kind of teach a few people, but I also don't want to teach a few people. One of the high tier is where I'm basically gonna show where I get some of my guitars and how I can make money doing it. And dude, that was a tough internal discussion to have with myself. I'm like, do you really want to do this? Like, do you want to blow up your own spot and create competition? Because I basically have none at some of the shops that I shop at, and the pricing is so good. And I'm willing to import things from Japan. It's not difficult for me, and I'm not afraid of it, and I have trustworthy places that I'm doing it. So that's something that I don't expect many people to sign up for that, but I think it's going to take one person, and it's going to like ruin me, because they're going to have more money than I do, so they're just going to immediately just like know where to go, and to just keep buying it and buying it and buying it, and I'm always going to be like right behind them, and it's going to suck. But I mean, I don't know. I think it'll be fun. I think the video request thing will be a little interesting too, kind of a more formal way to do it, because there's so many topics I want to make videos on, and then just like something new happens, and then it just gets put on the back burner. And you would think the fact that I do this daily would mean I have the time to like, oh, I'm going to do this one immediately right now. It just doesn't work like that, because some videos I want to really spend time on. And one video that I'm pissed off I haven't made yet is my JV/early Fender Japan video. I've wanted to make that video for like 5-6 months, and I want to do it right. And since I am putting stuff out every day, when I put in something that like really is important to me, I really don't want to half-ass it. So it's always just like it's never going to be perfect, but you want it to be as good as it can be.
Mm-hmm. Do you think you'll ever consider doing multi rather than daily, doing like a 2 or 3 a week, and trying to really concentrate on making them longer, or whatever you're deeming as higher quality, or how long are you planning on sticking to the daily schedule?
I don't know. At the very least until January 2nd, because that will mean I have done for an entire full year without missing a day. If I can make it to January 2nd, which I'm going to, I mean, there have been days I have been so sick. There have been days I've been traveling across the country moving. There have been days I've been in the process of moving into a house, moving out of a house. I've always gotten something out. So I'm going to do it. It's just a matter of getting there. But at that point, it's something I've been thinking about. And honestly, one of the reasons that I've been really considering scaling back a little bit is so that I can write like more and really sit and develop things, because this is a blessing and a curse. This is a complete first world problem, as you would say. I'll get in this really cool guitar to demo, right? And I'll be looking for a new way to play it, because nobody wants to hear the same guy demo the same way every single demo. That sucks. That's boring. Mm-hmm. So I'll end up starting to come up with something, an idea that's something that could be fleshed out into a song. And then by the time, I'm like, I got to finish the video. I got to finish the video. Then I got to sit into a Final Cut. I got to edit the video. Then I got to tag it. I got to put everything up. By the time all that's done, it's like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. My kid has me up at 6 or 7, and it's just like, nope.
Yeah. Yep.
Nope.
No, I mean, I get it. It's honestly the daily thing, super impressive. It's crazy that you're doing that. I mean, but and obviously, I think like these are the kinds of things you have to do in the beginning. And I'm sure they'll hit a point where you won't feel like you have to do that. And yeah, I think it'd be great if you could. That's why these big guys do that, right? They want to do it so like MKBHD puts out a video every other week or every week or whatever because they're doing like an entire commercial's worth of cinematography for everyone, and they can't do that kind of shit daily. But that's what makes their videos. So, I mean, I think if it's obviously you have to find this kind of like line between healthy short content that you can do on a very regular basis, and then with whatever kind of quality you want to keep up with, and go, what does that require from me, and how much time do I need to put into it, and you'll find it.
Yeah, I'm not worried about it. And one thing that's really weird, everyone was like, "What are you burning out?" Or like, "When are you burning out?" I'm like, "I'm not burning out. I'm really not." Yeah. And it's like, I'm not short of ideas either. Like, I'm short of time more than anything else. And it is a balancing act. But and one thing that's been really nice about this channel is I feel like I've gotten a lot better at guitar because it's forced me to get better at guitar. And on top of that, this is like, I did this like right when I was like sober. So it was almost like relearning the instrument and breaking out of so many bad habits. So now, like, when I sit and write, it's a completely different experience. So I do want to like commit full days where it's just like, all right, I don't have to make videos today. I don't have to worry about this. And maybe I'll make short content instead. Maybe like little demo riffs and stuff like that with no talking, just like showing off some of the gear and stuff like that. And maybe that'll be the way I do it, but I don't know. We'll just have to see how it goes. All I know is that I really just am missing that like vibe of sitting and just like really writing and working on, my own music myself.
Yep. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I know.
So that's pretty much it. I don't know. You got anything else you want to talk about, Dave?
I think we hit our list, man. I don't have too much else, we got some stuff upcoming for the band stuff that I think would kind of be cool to. I don't know if anybody is interested in this kind of content, but we just got off of an incredibly weird year of working with a producer online to make an album, and I think there's probably some insights for some people into that kind of process that could be kind of cool to talk about. If anybody wants to hear about that, please leave a comment below, and we can chat about it on the next one. But the fruits of that, kind of working on that are coming up, so that's kind of exciting. But otherwise, no, man, that's all I got.
Okay, well, when it comes to that, I was already planning on helping you as far as promoting it and as far as, using this channel as a vessel for you guys, because it's really funny and it's sad because it just goes to show one last topic, because you have direct experience with this, okay? When you pay these people, you have a great product. You spend the money on the music video. You spend the money on recording it. You mix it. You pay to get it mastered. All this great stuff. If you don't have somebody that actually knows how to get eyeballs on it,
it doesn't matter.
It sucks. It sucks because I watch your guys' music videos and I'm like, these are great. I'm like one of them has like a few hundred views and I'm like, dude, this doesn't make sense. Like, this is annoying to me. So like, because you guys are good, and I wouldn't tell you were if you weren't. I would just be like, yeah, you guys are a band, or something like that, or I'd just get you away from it. But I think you're a great singer, and I've always kind of liked your style. So one thing that's always been missing for you, and even when I was living in California, you were like, do you have any advice on this? Because we're like paying people, and it feels like nothing's happening. And now that I've been getting into this, like the YouTube stuff, and like I can see how to make something get more views than others. I don't always exploit it because I don't want to be that guy, but I know little tricks around it, how to get more eyeballs on specific videos. So I actually really actively want to help with that. If you can get any sort of video, anything, just as far as B-roll, that would be awesome. Just whenever you can. Just always have a camera, even if it's just in the background of a room while you guys are working. Just always have it on. You never know when gold's going to happen. But that's stuff we could talk about off camera and, and stuff like that. But, I mean, just your last take on that. I mean, I just basically talked on your behalf. But what were your experiences from your perspective as far as paying people? And any advice that you would give somebody that's thinking of doing the same thing?
I don't have a good answer for the advice because I don't think we've figured out the best way to do it yet either. Obviously, we're a small kind of local band around here and stuff, and we've had the opportunity to work with and do cool things with cool people, and to me that's enough of my measure of success to be pretty happy with the things that we've done. But as far as like how to actually get music in front of people and eyeballs, I don't have a good answer. I wish I did. I mean, I think we've paid enough people who have done nothing at this point that, like I could tell you what not to do.
That's what I was asking. That was the first part of the question. Just what advice would you say to not to do? Yeah, you took it wrong.
Okay, so I would say we've had nothing but bad luck with PR people. So, and I think that's really not a measure against PR, because I think it's kind of the only thing that can do that stuff in the right place. But I think we just haven't found the right people yet, right? So, we had like a group that we worked with that we gave a bunch of money to, and they just basically, put a bunch of fancy Instagram posts up or whatever and sort of just left it at that. We were supposed to like get a bunch of stuff from them at the end, and they ghosted us, and that's happened a couple of times. And it's just like, I mean, I think the best advice to give anybody in this space is just like vet as much as possible. Like find people that have worked with people like this. Like at one point we had this guy who was trying to get us some radio play stuff, and he was promising a lot, and you know how that goes, right? So we reached out to a band that he had worked with, and they were like, yeah, we just did this deal with him, and he's awful. It's like the worst thing ever, right? Like we wasted a bunch of money. He's done none of the shit he said he was going to do, yada, yada, yada. And like, that's the kind of stuff that we've dove into things before without doing that kind of homework. And now we won't ever do it again. Right. Because we've blown money, and it's just about vetting people. It's about finding people, who have worked with them before, and really going like, was this worth the money? And, in some cases you can't do that or whatever. Like we've had good experience with a lot of the Spotify playlister guys and those kinds of things. Like we've done well in Spotify when we've kind of pushed the marketing towards that end. We've done really well on Facebook when we push the marketing towards that end. And we're good at focusing those things when you focus those things, but it all costs a shitload of money. Like there's nothing you can do without spending a shitload of money. So the goal this time around is to try to have everything as ready as possible. And then I want to go to a PR company that we know works and we know does good work. And we have built enough connections with people that I think we can find it this time around, and just go, hey, we have X amount of dollars, and we have a record that's 100% finished with all of the peripherals. Like if I give you this amount of dollars and it releases in 6 months, what can you do? And shop it around, And I think it's all we can do at this point.
So you still see value in getting a record deal?
No, because I paid for everything a record deal wants to give me money for already. What I see value in is the PR side. And I don't even think we're going to shop labels, because it was an idea. We thought about it, and then I just went, what is the label going to do for me? They're going to give me money to make a record that's already done. They're going to give me money to make a music video that's already done. And then they're going to take a whole shitload of money from the records I don't sell. Like there's just no point. So I'd rather go to a PR company and just go, I'm just going to pay you up front to do the job you were going to do for the label. And, and then I don't owe anybody anything,
Yeah, just start your own label. Costs you about $180 for the legal paperwork. Yep. File it under your own name. And then who knows, maybe somebody likes your band and they're like, let's invite her out that label. And then it turns out, oh, you own a recording studio. Oh, you tracked it here. You've just made business on so many levels. But that's the way that things should be. And that's the way that you need to just, become more self-sufficient and really think of business ways to make money on music and make money of the abilities that you do have, because we can feel guilty about it. And wrapping this up, going like even to the Patreon thing, it's like there is value there, in my opinion, to doing that as an artist. Not talking about just like myself here, but like if you're providing people with entertainment, or you're providing people with kind of lessons, or just like anything that somebody else will pay money for, you should never feel guilty about asking for that, because you're a fool if you're not, because nobody that's really great at their job is going to do it for free, period. So as musicians, you got to get that out of your head. You got to be willing to ask. And what's the worst thing that happens? Everyone says no. I mean, that's it. You feel bad for what, like a day or two, and you move on with your life. But as far as being a musician, even when you're booking gigs, don't be afraid to negotiate how much you're getting paid up front, and make sure it's in writing. I cannot stress that enough. And just take care of yourself, and don't be afraid. But that's going to be where we're going to wrap up this podcast. I promise this is really it. Thank you guys for listening, and we will see you next week. Hopefully, this will be an every Monday thing from now on because the schedules have kind of leveled off. Although, wait, no, we can't say that. Isn't next week Halloween?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we got little kids. We could probably squeeze it in on a Halloween evening.
Okay, so we're going to plan for next Monday. So other than that, thank you guys for watching. We will see you maybe next Monday. If not, probably Wednesday because it's Tuesday night. If not. Other than that, take care, you guys.